We have about 3 weeks left in 2018, and The Economist is predicting next year will be a, quote, wobbly one. From jittery markets to a trade war with China, the magazine's editor notes this is a tricky time for predictions. This year's issue takes a look at everything from U.S. politics and a possible looming Brexit to growing techlash and a new rush to the moon. For more, Daniel Franklin is the executive editor of The Economist, and he joins me now. Daniel, thanks so much for being here.
Pleasure.
Let's start with what you call the battle of 2019 between President Trump and the Democratic-controlled House. So we witnessed this extraordinary exchange in the Oval Office today. Was that perhaps a preview of what we might see going into 2019?
I think it absolutely was. There's this sense of really some attempts for bipartisanship, but then a lot of tension and a lot of scope for things suddenly to break out into conflict. And I think we're going to see that played out over and over again. And of course, we're going to see a lot of subpoenas coming the White House's way from the Democratic-controlled Congress. And we're also going to see a lot of candidates emerging on the Democratic side, a very crowded field, and President Trump is going to try and take them down as he sees them emerge. So I think it's going to be an extremely lively year in politics, to put it mildly.
Lively indeed. All right, let's talk about sort of across the pond here.
Yes.
And this Brexit situation. Tell me what your thoughts are here, because there's been so much in the way of developments here. You know, there was a question about whether or not people really wanted to do this. There is still that question as we speak at this moment. So tell us what you're seeing now, how things stand.
Well, it's basically a real mess, to put it in layman's terms.
Right.
What was supposed to happen was that Parliament was going to approve the deal that the British government had reached with the European Union, but it hasn't been able to approve that deal. So now anything is possible. We could have that deal in some form coming back and going through, or we could have a no deal at all and Britain crashing out amid chaos, or we could have a sort of step back from the brink and a decision to say, hang on a minute, let's call the whole thing off, let's stay in the European Union after all. It's all possible, and we're going to see probably changes of government along the way.
In your letter from the editor to open this issue, the first couple of points deal with the economy. How do things look regarding not just the domestic economy here, but the global economy in 2019?
Well, a lot less bright than they did a year ago. I think a year ago I was talking about about a synchronized upswing. It looked pretty bright around the world. And it was for a while, but now things look much harder. That's why I call it wobbly. China is slowing, Europe is nervous. The big question is the United States, and halfway through the year, next year, it should be breaking records for the longest ever expansion. But that's the moment when you start to worry, how long can this go on for, especially with interest rates rising, with the trade war, with the stimulus from Trump's tax cuts wearing off.
And how much of a factor do you think these trade tensions between the U.S. and China will be?
Well, I think there's clearly an effort to try to reach some sort of a deal, but this goes quite deep. And there's, I think, quite a fundamental reassessment gone on about China as an emerging rival to America, and one that needs to be held back at various levels, militarily, technologically, culturally. And so I don't think it's going to be easy just to solve it with a few tariff concessions and China buying American commodities. I think that tension is going to go on through 2019.
So last year, The Economist predicted what it called a techlash. And Google CEO Sundar Pichai was on Capitol Hill Tuesday. He was asked about the amount of data the company collects from users. Now, we've seen regulation, of course, in the EU, but do you think we're going to be seeing the U.S. take a similar route?
I think much more scrutiny in America, too. Whether America takes the same route as Europe has done remains to be seen, but I think there is a growing sense that consumers want controls over the amount of data that is collected by these companies. They're enormously powerful, and there is increasingly a sense that they need to be reined back in some way.
All right. Sounds like a busy 2019 ahead. Daniel Franklin, thanks so much for stopping by, Daniel.
Thank you.
And a quick reminder, The Economist's World in 2019 is on newsstands now and can be found online and in the Economist app.